Chapter 1. Returning to Herself. Olivia Harper opened the door of the old wooden cabin and breathed in the cold, fresh air of the mountain morning. Colorado greeted her with the silence she had been seeking for so long. New York City was behind her, with its noise, lights, and constant rush that exhausted even the most energetic. Here, among the pines and the scent of pine needles, she felt time slow down, and she finally believed she could immerse herself in her novel without interruptions. The cabin stood at the edge of a small valley, offering a view of mountains stretching up to the sky. Olivia placed her suitcase on the floor, walked around the room, touched the rough walls, and felt calm envelop her body. Everything she loved was here. Wooden beams, old shelves filled with books, a fireplace with no fire yet burning, and a small window looking out onto a slope dotted with sparse bushes and tall grass. She unpacked her things, took out her laptop and notebook. Olivia's gaze fell on the manuscript, the novel she had been working on for the past 2 years. It had always been more than just a story to her. It was an attempt to understand herself, to look deep into her own emotions, fears, and dreams. Here, in solitude, she could allow herself to write without hindrance, without prying eyes, and without anyone else's expectations. The first day passed in silence. Olivia sat for a long time at the wooden table, unpacking her thoughts, writing down separate scenes that had been waiting for their moment. Every word became like a mirror of her soul, and she felt herself rediscovering who she was. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the pines, and the sun barely pierced through the clouds, casting warm rays on the mountain peaks. The following days became routine, yet happy. Olivia woke with the first rays of the sun, made coffee, stepped onto a small terrace, and listened to nature waking alongside her. She took short walks around the cabin, collected leaves, and sometimes photographed landscapes for inspiration. Everything was new, fresh, and at the same time incredibly familiar in its simplicity. In the evenings, she sat by the fireplace, writing scenes that arose in her mind. The crackle of the logs soothed her, and the aroma of burning wood added a special atmosphere, as if the cabin itself was becoming part of her story. Olivia felt that she could finally not only write, but create a world that had long been simmering in her thoughts. One morning, during a walk, she stumbled upon a small forest path leading to a lake. The water was clear, reflecting the sky and mountain peaks. Olivia sat on a rock by the shore and took out her notebook. She jotted down her impressions, little details that might later become part of her novel. How the light filtered through the branches, how the wind played with the ripples on the water's surface, how the birds flying overhead created a sense of motion in the stillness. Despite the calm, Olivia felt a certain loneliness, not the kind that frightens, but the kind that pushes one inward, revealing personal fears and joys. She noticed that she had not spent time so consciously for a long while, without phones, messages, and deadlines. Here, in the mountains, every moment mattered. Every breath, every sound was important, and she was learning to appreciate it. Gradually, Olivia began to notice small changes within herself. She became more attentive to details, calmer in her thoughts, and yet more decisive in her words. Every scene in her novel became deeper, more truthful. She felt that the cabin and nature had become a catalyst for her creativity. Then, one evening, as the sun set on the horizon, Olivia heard laughter below, in the valley. It was loud and cheerful, yet unfamiliar. At first, she thought it was tourists or locals, but later she noticed figures appearing on the path, several young people behaving carelessly and a little boldly. She felt a slight discomfort. She was used to silence, and now there was suddenly noise, unfamiliar eyes as if intruding on her space. She observed them from a distance, deciding not to make contact. Yet curiosity and caution battled within her at the same time. She understood that their presence could disrupt her peace, but at the same time, she was drawn to learn more about the locals. This was her first feeling that the story she was writing might intersect with reality. And perhaps it was here that she would find the depth she had been seeking, not only in her novel, but also in her own life. Olivia did not yet know that those figures on the path would become the beginning of trials that would test her determination and ingenuity. She only felt that she was ready to open herself to a world that had previously seemed merely a backdrop for her stories. And perhaps it was here that she would find the depth she had been seeking, not only in her novel, but also in her own life.
Chapter 2: The Emergence of Conflict. The next morning, Olivia woke to the soft tapping of something against the window. She listened carefully and realized it was the wind playing with the branches of the trees. She took a deep breath, trying to embrace the peace she loved so much in these mountains. Yet inside her, something stirred, a sense that her tranquility would be tested today. After breakfast, she decided to take a walk along the path to a small rural store located a few miles from the cabin. Along the way, Olivia admired the scenery: golden mountain peaks, leaves still covered in dew, thin rays of sunlight filtering through the clouds. Everything seemed perfect here, and for a moment she forgot about the pressures of the real world. However, as she approached the store, her gaze landed on a group of local boys. There were 4 or 5 of them, all about her age, with broad shoulders and confident smiles. They were sitting on the edge of a wooden porch, laughing loudly and carelessly, which at first seemed like a pleasant contrast to the silence of the mountains. "Hey, are you new here?" One of them, tall with dark hair, called out to her. His voice was smooth, carrying a faint smile that seemed to hide something else, cunning or playfulness. Olivia felt a slight chill down her spine, but greeted him politely. She understood that she could not appear afraid, especially when interacting with people she did not know. The boys invited her to join a small conversation near the store, and Olivia, feeling a mix of curiosity and perhaps too much trust, agreed. They talked about the weather, the mountains, and small local celebrations. Their behavior seemed friendly, yet something in their eyes during laughter made Olivia tense. Within a few days, Olivia began to notice that the boys were appearing near her cabin more frequently. At first, she thought it was coincidence, but after several repetitions, she realized they were watching her. Her heart began to race whenever she saw their figures among the trees or along the path. She tried to avoid contact, visiting the store at different times and generally limiting interaction. But one evening, the situation spiraled out of control. Olivia was returning from a walk to the cabin when they appeared from all sides, as if determined to intercept her along the way. Her heart froze, and her mind screamed, "Run!" The boys surrounded her. Their smiles no longer seemed friendly. They were harsh, confident, and menacing. Olivia felt panic rising, but alongside it came an instinctive drive to survive. She shoved one of them, knocking him back slightly, and ran. Her legs shook, her heart pounded so fiercely it felt as though it might burst from her chest. She knew every corner, every path she had walked over the past few days, and used this knowledge to evade her pursuers. Branches lashed her arms and face, feet tripped over tree roots, yet Olivia did not stop. Her only goal was to reach the cabin. When she finally managed to close the door behind her, her heart raced uncontrollably. She hid in an inner room, listening to the sounds that seemed to retreat. Every noise felt dangerous, but gradually the silence returned. Olivia realized she had been lucky. She had escaped. The following days were filled with fear and vigilance. She understood that she could not remain passive, for these boys were a threat. And then an idea sparked in her mind. Not merely to avoid danger, but to act. Olivia decided that she needed to find a way to protect herself, to use her skills, intellect, and knowledge of the area to prepare for the moment when she would have to confront them. Her inner strength began to awaken. What had initially seemed like terror was now a challenge. She began planning. She wrote down in her notebook all the details she noticed about the boys, their habits, routes, moments when they relaxed. She observed little things that could become useful. She realized that this was not just fear, it was a lesson in survival, and that this experience, terrible and painful, was giving her a strength she had never felt before. Every night spent in fear became a night of preparation. Every day became training for her intuition, awareness, and resolve. She felt that she was not only protecting herself, but discovering a new level of her own power. She realized that now her life was not just a novel. It was a struggle for herself, for her autonomy, for the right to be free. And although her body was tired and her heart teetered on the edge of despair, her mind and spirit were clearer than ever before. By the end of the week, she felt the first glimmer of control. She began to feel like an active participant in events rather than a victim. She knew the next step would be difficult, but she was ready. And although danger still loomed, Olivia felt that she now possessed not only fear, but also a plan. Not only panic, but also determination. The mountains remained quiet, yet inside Olivia, a storm raged. It was a storm that tempered her, made her stronger, preparing her for what would eventually evolve into a new phase, a phase of revenge, when she would no longer be powerless. And in that silence, among the trees, in that cabin, she felt that her life had changed forever and that she was ready to embrace the new rules of the game.
Chapter 3. The First Steps of Revenge. Olivia spent her days in meticulous preparation. She found an old journal in the cabin and began noting everything she observed about the boys, their routes, habits, even their weaknesses. Each line was like a map leading toward control of the situation. She knew that physical strength alone would not help against several people at once, so she developed a strategy based on observation, intellect, and surprise. In the evening, as the sun hid behind the mountains, Olivia set out on her first reconnaissance. She wore dark clothing that did not attract attention and watched the boys from a distance. They were laughing near the old store, unaware that someone was carefully observing them. She noticed their habits, when they relaxed, how they spoke to each other, when each stepped away for a moment to check their phone or grab a snack. Returning to the cabin, Olivia analyzed the data. She understood that revenge would require time and patience. This was not to be an instant act of anger. It had to be a precise, controlled action that would bring her not only satisfaction, but also the restoration of power her body and mind had lost during the attack. The next day, she ventured out again, this time closer to one of the boys' homes. Olivia noticed that he usually left the door unlocked when going to the store. This was an opportunity for her first step. She took a deep breath, feeling her heart tighten with anticipation, and made her move. She entered his nearly empty room, leaving behind subtle signs meant to remind him of her presence. She left small hints, scattered items, little notes suggesting that someone was watching closely. It was psychological, the fear of the unknown. Olivia knew that the boy would not understand immediately, but gradually he would feel that someone controlled the situation. This was the first lesson. Power is not only in physical influence, but in control over another's mind. When the boy returned, Olivia observed from a distance. He appeared frightened, nervously glancing around. The realization that she could make him feel fear filled her with energy. This was not a narrow sense of revenge. It was control, the restoration of the authority her body and mind had lost
during the attack. In the following days, Olivia continued her observation and preparation. She memorized every route. Every place they went together. She used the night to implement her plan, leaving behind only psychological signals, small hints that someone was watching closely. Her confidence grew. Every small step of revenge added to her strength. She felt that she was no longer a victim. She had become an active participant in her own fate. And it was this sense of control that gave her the inner resolve for the next stage. She realized one important truth. Revenge should not be chaotic. It must be precise, methodical, deliberate. Every action was a lesson for those who had disturbed her peace. Every step was a signal that Olivia was no longer powerless. One evening, Olivia stood at the edge of her cabin, looking at the dark outlines of the mountains. The wind played with her hair, and silence filled the space around her. She realized that the first phase was complete. Psychological control was established, and fear had begun to work in her favor. Now it was time to move forward, to act physically, but thoughtfully, so that every encounter with the boys would bring her not only satisfaction, but also safety and confidence. Olivia prepared everything for the next step. She did not act in anger. She acted coldly and deliberately. Each boy received a lesson through his own behavior, through what he had thought insignificant. She used her mind, intuition, and psychology to ensure that every moment of meeting her left them with fear and respect. When night fell over the mountain paths, Olivia felt that her transformation had reached the first level. She was no longer the helpless girl trapped in a corner. She had become a strategist who knew the rules of the game and was ready to act. Every step had given her a strength she had never felt before. The mountains remained silent witnesses to her plan, yet inside Olivia, a storm of preparation raged. She knew that many challenges lay ahead, but now she had a plan, knowledge, and determination. And although her heart sometimes remembered the fears of the past, her mind and spirit were stronger. This was only the first chapter of her revenge, the first lesson for those who had disrupted her life. And in this silence, among the mountains and trees, Olivia felt that from now on, she alone controlled her fate. Every day, every night, every action brought her closer to completing her plan. And she was ready to walk the entire path, leaving nothing to chance.
Chapter 4. Direct confrontations and escalating conflict. Olivia felt that it was time for the next stage. The psychological control she had established was working, but now she needed to act directly. Each boy had to feel the consequences of his actions, but in a way that kept us safe. The first was the least cautious of them. Olivia observed him from a distance for several days, studying his routes, learning his habits. She knew when he usually went for a run, where he went after work, when he relaxed. Every detail was critical. One evening, as he ran past an old warehouse, Olivia made her move. She was prepared, not physically, but psychologically. Her presence, her eyes, her cold stare were meant to act as a signal. When he saw her, his heart skipped a beat. He realized that someone knew where he went, that someone was watching her. Olivia said nothing. She left a small reminder, a note with the words, "I remember." The boy felt a wave of fear and guilt he could not explain. The next day, Olivia watched his behavior from the distance. He walked nervously along the street, glancing around and holding his phone like a shield. Exactly what she wanted, to feel power over someone who had once disrespected her. The second boy was craftier, more cautious. Olivia had to devise a more intricate strategy. She discovered that he often left his car at an old parking lot near the forest. That was where she planned their encounter. In the evening, she followed him after work and left a small sign on his car window, a handprint with the words, "I see you." He noticed it only that evening upon returning.
His eyes widened with fear. She did not engage. She simply left a trace of her presence. This small gesture created a sense of danger, a feeling that her control extended everywhere. Olivia retreated into the darkness, satisfied that her plan was working. The third boy was the most dangerous. He was bigger than the others, physically strong and unpredictable. Olivia understood that subtle hints would not work here. This required decisiveness and a precise plan. She decided to use his own overconfidence against him. She knew where he usually met with friends and that he liked to play poker in the basement of an old club. Olivia followed him for several days, recording every detail: who entered, when he left, what he usually did. She created the illusion that nothing was happening, and then suddenly appeared where no one expected her. When he noticed her, he froze for a moment. Olivia said nothing. Her cold stare and calm posture spoke louder than any words. He felt fear, the same fear she had once experienced during the attack. She allowed him to confront his own helplessness, demonstrating that now the power was in her hands. After each encounter, Olivia withdrew, analyzing each boy's behavior. She noticed the little things, how they moved nervously, how they checked their phones, how they altered their routes. Every small movement showed her that fear was working and that her strategy was effective. Olivia realized one crucial truth: revenge was not only physical, it was psychological. She had learned to control the situation, leaving traces of her fear and presence in the minds of those who had once destroyed her life. This control gave her a strength she never felt before. And although Olivia acted cautiously, she did not stop preparing for the next steps. She continued observing, analyzing, planning. Every day added new data. Every action brought her closer to the final confrontation with all those who had caused her pain. Night fell with the shadows of the mountains, and Olivia stood on the cabin veranda, looking at the dark outlines of the trees. She felt that the first phase of revenge, psychological control, and the initial encounters was complete. Now it remained to act carefully, yet decisively, to restore balance and feel true power over her fate. Olivia's inner calm mixed with adrenaline. She knew many challenges lay ahead, but now she was ready. The mountains were silent, the shadows hid secrets, and Olivia realized she now set the rules of the game, and everyone who had caused her pain would receive their reward: harsh, cold, methodical, but just.
Chapter 5. The final phase of revenge and resolution. Olivia stood on the threshold of the final phase. She had established psychological control over all three boys, leaving traces of fear in their minds. But now it was time to complete the task, not through chaos or violence, but through a precise, methodical plan that fully restored her control. She decided to confront the most dangerous first. He did not realize that his own pride and confidence were his weaknesses. Olivia used this to her advantage. She arranged a chance encounter in an old, abandoned warehouse, a place where he felt secure. When he saw her, his confidence evaporated instantly. Olivia looked him directly in the eyes, and without a word, he felt the full depth of her determination. She gave him a choice: repent and acknowledge his actions, or face consequences he could not anticipate. His fear was so intense that he yielded to her calm. Olivia felt her plan working. Control and authority were completely in her hands. The second boy, craftier and more cautious, was next. She knew his routes and behavior so well that she could predict each step. Olivia orchestrated a meeting at his favorite cafe, where he always felt in control. This time, the situation shifted. She appeared suddenly, with a cold gaze, and his smile vanished. She silently placed a photograph on the table. small evidence of their past interactions, reminding him that she remembered everything. His heart trembled, and he realized the game was over. Olivia left him with a choice: repent and acknowledge his actions, or face consequences he could not anticipate. The third boy, who had once seemed least dangerous, now felt the full weight of his actions. Olivia arranged everything so he could experience his fear through his own choices. She left traces in his apartment that signaled her presence: photographs, notes, items he could not ignore. Each mark contributed to the psychological pressure. When he tried to escape reality, Olivia already knew where he would go and what he would see. She created the illusion that her presence was everywhere, and his own conscience began to work against him. He realized he could not run from what he had done, and that Olivia controlled the situation without using violence. The final meeting took place in the mountains, where it all began. Olivia returned to her small cabin and invited all three to an unexpected encounter, but only as part of their choice: accept the truth or continue hiding in fear. They stood before her, each sensing that her power was not physical but psychological, that she had changed the rules of the game forever. Olivia did not seek revenge through pain. She sought balance, the restoration of her strength, and reclaiming control over her own life. Each boy remained alive but changed because Olivia allowed them to feel the consequences of their actions. She left them with fear, doubt, and the understanding that no one could ever disturb her peace again. Afterwards, Olivia stood on the threshold of her cabin, looking at the mountains. The wind played with her hair, and the sun set behind the ridges, illuminating the path she had traveled. She felt an inner strength she had never known: control, freedom, and peace. She had endured a terrible experience but transformed it into a source of power. Her novel, which she had come to finish, now held new meaning. Every scene, every dialogue reflected not only her literary talent, but also her inner journey, her struggle, healing, and mastery over her own fate. Olivia realized that true strength is not in destroying others, but in restoring herself. Evening fell and she sat by the window of her cabin, reviewing the pages of her novel. The horizon was calm, the mountain shadows adding mystery and power. She understood. No one could influence her life without her consent. Every act of revenge, every decision, every move had returned her control, and now Olivia was free. Free from fear, trauma, and the past. With serenity and clarity, she completed the final paragraph of her novel. She knew this was not merely a literary story. It was the story of her own restoration, struggle, and victory. Olivia closed her laptop, inhaled the mountain air, and for the first time felt true freedom. Freedom, strength, and control were now in her hands, and the world around her existed within her perception. She knew life goes on, and now she alone determines her destiny.